Alrighty. Hello and welcome to my final assignment for strategic planning. My name is Will Reynolds and I'm joined here today with my brother Sam. He will be interviewing me today based on the second half of our class and what I have learned thus far. So, Sam, if you'll please start us off.
All right, hello, William. So the first question I'd like to ask you is tell me what you have learned thus far about strategic planning, specifically the last four steps of this process.
Absolutely. So, to begin with the final four steps, we got to begin with step five, which is to answer the questions. This is the part of our process where we have to develop strategies. This is essentially our problem solving part of the process. Using our previously discovered strategic areas, strategies, and action plans from the last step, we hope to flow into each step, as the book describes it, cascading from general ideas to more specific steps. Once these areas are identified, we use the term strategic goals and articulate these as questions beginning with the words, how can we? So we move away from the generalities of the framework into a more specific area of asking the right questions. Um, Once these areas are identified, again, we start with how can we. Using the snow card method that we discussed in our previous assignment or the conversation cafes, we offer engaging ways to involve large numbers of people to decide upon the best strategies. In developing the strategic plan, you ultimately gain a lot of diverse information from a multitude of people and positions, ranging from the top of the organization all the way to the bottom. Ideally, this is the turning point in this process. In this step, the strategic planning team decides on I would say, three issues that we will now take on as our priorities. Moving on into step six, which is get specific. This is where we write out the action steps. You're probably asking yourself, what are these action steps and how do we quantify what they are? They ideally include three criteria. We need to specifically ask what is going to be done, who is going to be responsible for getting it done, and by when will it be done. So we're establishing very specific criteria to measure these action steps. Another way in the book we described a way to measure, especially to ensure implementation, is defining a term or an action step as a go or a no-go. So for an example, if the HR team wanted to expand their services a little bit and they wanted to do it by a set date, that would be defined as a no go because there's a certain time period it's going to be, executed, and you can define it as it happened or not, go or no go. After that, I would say making two people accountable for each item is pertinent for assurance of accountability to make sure that we're not falling into groupthink. A department lead's just pushing everything to the side. We're putting two people who are very different in positional wise, but they can hold each other accountable and push, I would say, the direction that needs to be moved forward. After that, we talk about timeline. We want to see between, I'd say, 3 to 12 months. Any time longer or shorter than that runs the risk of, I would say, the information not sinking in enough, or too much time has passed and it's just out of our brains entirely. So being mindful of these things, being mindful of who we're working with and what it can bring about conflict wise, we talked about in this chapter. Two specific areas. One is task conflict, which that can just arise through a disagreement of how a process and work's going to go down. It can ideally be very beneficial for a company because you can uncover some priorities that have been ignored up to this point. But it's the personal conflicts or the relationship conflicts that we want to avoid. This can distract us from work, and it can really just derail the process in general. Moving on to step seven, this is where we discover the vision. We want to ultimately craft our vision statement. Ideally, a vision should involve everyone in the organization. It should inspire others to share, contribute, expand, and join in on this so that it's a shared vision, like we talked a lot about in class. A leader doesn't just explain the vision, he truly embodies it, or he or she truly embodies it. Some traits of common successful leadership that we talked about were those that were forward thinking, those that were open, honest, passionate, and overall inspiring with the direction that they sought to move forward to. Ultimately, a vision that identifies the destination an organization wants to go. It ideally needs to be clear, short. I would say accomplishable is the big key factor here. You really want to challenge the imagination of some of what the culture has to, I would say, offer, as well as describing the future of where we're going to go. Um, Moving on to step 8. This is the final step of our process, and it is titled Hold Yourself Accountable. This is the time for implementation and the evaluation of the process of its entirety. Step 8 addresses how organizational life changes after a strategic planning process. There's no point in all of this information, all of this effort, without these follow-ups, coming back to these timelines of following up 3, 6, 9, 12 months down the road. If we don't put in this effort, there's no point in any of this because most research into strategic planning shows that follow through is really lacked upon and that true implementation can never happen because, yeah, there's no follow through. And ideally, the book suggests quarterly accountability meetings. It's a good way to secure implementation. And yeah, that would be the final steps of our strategic planning process.
Okay. uh, so go ahead and tell me about the organization that you selected for your assignment.
Yeah, so the organization I chose for this is my job that I currently work at, Sherwin-Williams. What we do as a company, we are a paint and coating and contracting supply company. We work with homeowners as well as contractors who build new homes. I would say just repaint residential homes as well as a lot of property maintenance. So we're very diverse in our market, I would say. My role specifically, I'm just the customer associate. So I'm in charge of the day-to-day operations, cash transactions, inventory. I would say the day-to-day operations in general. And yeah, that's what I do full time.
Okay, very nice. So William, how would you apply the last four steps of our process to the organization you selected?
Yeah, so for going back to step 5, answering the questions, I touched on this in my previous assignment of my method I'd go about it. And that was the snow card method. A little quick, what is that for you? Essentially, you get I'd say a large group, a decent sized group of people within your organization. You task them with cards put in front of them to put down, I would say, words or phrases that I would say, describe problems facing the organization, things that could change in the processes, their day to day, maybe management style. It's a way to uncover things holding the company back, essentially. And this snow card method, you get like a stack of cards. Again, you put like a word or a phrase, and you put it against a wall where sooner or later that wall starts to get covered in these white cards, almost like snowfall, where you get a big picture idea of, I'd say, the thoughts and feelings of your collective group, and you can see it all in one picture of emerging themes that might come out. So I found to be actually pretty effective at my job. I did it at a very small scale, but I basically used the information and I laid it out for everyone to see, and I tasked them with developing primary themes that they agreed on as a group that emerged from that discussion. Moving on to step 6, how would I go about, I would say, applying that into my strategic plan? I would probably follow through on the accountability check-ins, like that timeline down the road. One of our main areas that we kind of pinpointed was inventory issues, more or less, I would say, the discrepancy on what it says we have versus what we actually had on hand. I'd say a good way to get very specific and more measurable would be to attach a timeline. We do have inventory coming up in about a month. After that, the New Year's rolling around in about 2 months. So I think from that November date to, early January is a good timeline to see a true difference made in that strategic area that they kind of zeroed in on. Moving on to step 7, discovering the vision. I had the idea of taking from the book where they had you go back to the groups, but this time you don't rotate. You just, I would say you get closer, you zero in on it a little bit more. You ask each participant to write down a word or a phrase that answers the question, how will the world look different when your strategic plan has been fully implemented? So I think getting them to think of not only just the organization, but how we're going to be represented to everybody in the market, I think is a way to get their brains thinking a little bit, get them to critically think and really question maybe the norms that have been established so far. Moving to step 8, our final step. I think this one to me was the most interesting. And it came at the end of the chapter. They asked the question, how do we, going forward, those a part of this process, how do we get them to continually think strategically? And he laid it out. He called it the 5-step strategic thinking process. First step was you have to find out what your people know. You have to find out where their knowledge is at. After that, you have to conduct research to further the understanding. So find a way to bridge that gap of the people that you're working for that may not know what you know. After that, you can narrow your scope of your analysis to priority issues. So you get them to focus in instead of all the issues, what's really priority, what's priority number one. After that, you would take action steps that move your business forward in the direction that would solve some of those priorities or, those pain points. And finally, you want to adjust your strategic plan accordingly. Everything's not going to fit perfectly in this plan, but a big thing of it is being adaptive and being able to shift and adjust your plan accordingly. So those are the ways that I would implement our plan and my strategic plan in my organization moving forward.
Okay, very nice. And I
All right.
appreciate you describing the snow card method.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate your contribution.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
All righty.
Have a good
Thank
rest
you.
of your night.